Chapter 3. After the excitement of the first day, the rest of the week was uneventful. Celia had been correct in her assessment that the first few days of the session were more formality and tradition than actual discussion and decision-making. Ashe was able to sit back and fall into a bit of a routine, observing a lot of the government process that he'd only been able to read about in school. He began to relax and get comfortable around the other lords. Even Duke Fraldarius had stopped him after one session to welcome him to the capital and the council. By the end of the week, however, Lenato was still not well enough to begin attending sessions. During the second week, the governing process picked up steam, and Ashe was actually voting in his father's place. At first, it was just minor decisions, such as which citizens' petitions had gathered enough community support to be on upcoming ballots. Eventually, the conversations turned into debates over trade agreements with neighboring governments, and whether or not Fargus should consider sending supplies to aid Brigid should they go to war within the year. Luckily for Ashe, his brother Christoph had a penchant for political conversation, and Ashe was present at many conversations between him and their father. Before they had left the capital, Lenato had given Ashe a bit of coaching as to what he should expect from the council conversations. As needed, he confidently cast his vote for the side that Lenato would have supported. Today's debate on a proposed tax plan for the kingdom was proving to be a heated one. The councils of the local territories had been petitioning for a tax system that would help the merchant class and working families, while the nobility and more well-to-do citizens complained that the current system was fine and did not need change. On the one hand, Ashe agreed with the citizens. He knew how businesses in Gaspard were struggling and could only imagine similar situations in the larger territories. On the other hand, he could see where the lords were coming from as well. If given a bit more time, the current system would reach a balance. Though, as he sat in the chamber listening to the lords' debate, it seemed to Ashe that many of the lords weren't really interested in the infrastructure and development of their territories, with just a handful of exceptions. It was the duty of a noble house, especially a ruling house, to help advance the territory, and that included monetarily. Why some of the lords were fighting back on that fact? Lord Hubert. Ashe startled to attention. Oh crap, he'd been caught not paying attention to the conversation around him, like a student who had dozed off during class. So much for making good impressions. Yes, Your Highness? Prince Dimitri seemed to not notice Ashe's absent mind. What are your thoughts on this plan? He asked, gesturing towards Count Charon and Baron Gideon, who had been in a shouting match a moment ago. 3, 2, 1. Who had been in a shouting match a moment ago. Ashe swallowed, his brain struggling to catch up, acutely aware that all the eyes of the entire Council of Lords had shifted to focus fully on him. My thoughts? On the tax plan, Your Highness? Surely you have an opinion, do you not? Eyes upon him again, Ashe remembered that Lenato had prepared him for this very discussion. As protocol dictated, he stood to address the prince. Well, as far as taxes go, it's a very progressive plan, and I think— I don't want to hear the politically correct answer, the prince interrupted, slamming his fist on the tabletop. The gathered men flinched as the sound bounced off the walls of the council chamber. Prince Dimitri rubbed his eyes and sighed in frustration. I know Lord Lenato's stance on the subject. I want to know what you think. The prince looked up to meet Ashe's eyes, brilliant blue shining with ambition and sincerity. You are the most familiar with how Gaspard runs, how its citizens live. I'd wager more so than Lenato himself in some ways. Be honest with me. How will this tax plan affect them? Ashe looked around the room nervously, fidgeting with his ring. Initially, he considered repeating the response he and Lenato had practiced should he be called upon during council. But something about the prince's demeanor inspired Ashe to speak his mind. His eyes shone with such honesty and candor. Clearing his throat, Ashe gathered his courage and steeled himself. With the council temporarily forgotten, he spoke openly and candidly to Prince Dimitri. Honestly, Your Highness, a plan such as this could be detrimental to some of our most vulnerable citizens, he said sadly, voice steadying and gaining strength as he continued. I agree that as nobles and lords of our territories, we need to be just as invested both physically and monetarily in our territories. But to leave such a loophole in the tax plan that will allow certain people to pay less than their fair share, it's dishonest and, frankly, a slap in the face to our citizens. One of the lords inhaled sharply, but Ashe continued like a broken dam, no longer able to hold back the tides. In Gaspard, for example, our farmers are still struggling to recover from last year's drought. Our businesses are barely profitable due to failing trade negotiations with Adrestia. Leicester has been a great help in that regard, but some may still close for good when the year is up. Poverty has increased. People are stealing just to feed their families, and they have been for a long, long time. I wouldn't rule out some kind of uprising or rebellion. Dipping his head and looking away from Ashe, Prince Dimitri raised his hand, silencing him. Enough, he said softly, sadly. I had no idea the West was struggling so. For that, I am truly sorry. I have failed our citizens, and I will work to remedy that. Letting out a held breath, he lifted his gaze to Ashe's eyes once again. Thank you, Lord Hubert. Your insight is extremely valuable to this council, and especially to myself. Recognizing the end of the conversation, Ashe bowed to the prince and took his seat. Addressing the council, the prince continued. The plan as it is currently written is not acceptable. There needs to be another solution, one that will not allow such a burden on our most vulnerable. At the very least, a clause regarding rate adjustment must be revised and allow for local councils and their citizens to approve or deny major adjustment rates. Therefore, this bill is hereby sent back to committee for further discussion and revision. The prince rapped his gavel on the desk, ending the debate for now. The day ended with the creation of a new committee to review the tax bill and its proposed addendums. 2 lords from each area of the kingdom would begin meeting next week to update and revise the details of the bill before presenting it again to the full council for a vote. Counts Rowe and Gideon would represent the West, and Ashe would serve as a temporary aide to the committee at large. Prince Dimitri had insisted on it, much to the displeasure of the more affluent leaders, including Lady Cornelia, who still looked down her nose at Ashe any chance she got. Ashe rubbed his temples, feeling the start of a headache settling in. How did Kristoff put up with this when he was at council? He made a mental note to ask his brother when they spoke next. He gathered his belongings and made his way out of the council room, looking forward to the break of the weekend. Lord Hubert, a moment if you will? Ashe turned the corner, coming face to face with Prince Dimitri. The prince smiled as he approached, his vassal, a silent yet commanding presence behind him. Others in the corridor moved swiftly around them on to their next tasks or appointments, eventually emptying and leaving the men alone. Ashe bowed. What can I do for you, Your Highness? Nothing, rather. It's something I can do for you. I wanted to apologize, Lord Hubert, the prince said sheepishly, rubbing the back of his neck, for earlier, when I asked you about the tax plan. I did not mean to put you on the spot like that. Ashe blinked. This was not what he had been expecting. Oh, no, Your Highness, that's quite all right. I'm just glad I could say something of value. Everything you have done so far this session has been valuable, Lord Hubert. Do not sell yourself short. You will make a great Lord of Gaspard in the future. Ashe blushed at the easy praise. Thank you, Your Highness. Though my brother Kristoff will be the Lord of Gaspard once Leonardo is ready to retire, I'm just kind of along for the ride. The prince hummed thoughtfully. Even so, I'm sure your citizens rest easy knowing that not only one, but both of their future lords will stand up for them in court. I don't know Kristoff that well, but I've known Lord Leonardo my entire time in the council, and it's clear he's raising you both with his morals and values. Thank you for your kind words, Your Highness. I will pass them on to my father. Silence stretched between them, so long that Ashe wondered if that was the end of the conversation. It felt like a natural end, but the prince had not dismissed him. Could he excuse himself? Or was that genuinely frowned upon? Ashe was never certain about the royal protocol. Saving him from having to decide what to do, the prince's vassal cleared his throat. Your Highness, it's time for your next appointment. The prince twisted his wrist to look at his watch. So it is. Thank you for the reminder, Dedu. He smiled at Ashe. Is your schedule free tomorrow afternoon, Lord Hubert? My schedule? Oh, yes, I believe so. Fantastic. Would you care to join me for tea? Nothing formal, just casual, get-to-know-you sort of thing. I'm making it a point of my rule to truly know those on the council, and through them, their citizens, as my father had. The prince's face sharpened and turned more serious. I was serious when I said I would remedy my ignorance of the Western territories, Lord Hubert. You have my word. I know you will, Your Highness, and on behalf of Gaspard, I thank you. He bowed to the prince. Also, if you like, you may call me Ashe, Your Highness. The prince's smile grew. Very well, Ashe. And when we are not in official company, please, call me Dimitri. Thank you. I'll try, Dimitri. Dimitri nodded. Either Dedu or Cornelia will be in touch about tea tomorrow. I look forward to it. He walked past Ashe, Dedu close behind on his way to the next item on his schedule. Ashe leaned against the wall of the corridor, winded as though he had just run a mile in the snow. I'm looking forward to it too, Dimitri?